said by all Muslims around the world in this grand statement, one which cannot be found elsewhere, one which is not comparable to any other statement, because there is no family member of Rasulullah, there is no companion of Rasulullah that has had a statement equivalent like this. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not state this about any other companion. And so there is a wonderful blessing and a particular level of companionship and proximity between Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and the Holy Messenger in this particular statement. This evening, inshallah, in order to honor Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, we wish to analyze this very famous hadith. Hussein is from me and I am from Hussein, in order to explore what the Holy Prophet of Islam may have meant by it. What in its practical application did it mean for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam? And ultimately how you and I may practically benefit from the hadith itself. This last point is very important because you and I may build a very complex theology around this particular hadith. You and I may be able to establish matters of Imamat and Khilafat based upon this particular hadith. However, if we leave the hadith to only express these matters, then the hadith itself does not become of practical benefit to you and I. Meaning that we cannot apply it any way into our own lives in order to maximize our own spirituality, in order for it to be a means of proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hadith are of two kinds. There are those which you may speak and know about, and then there are those hadith which you and I implement. And there is a vast difference between the two. In fact, our sixth Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi, is narrated to have said, one hadith that you understand is greater than 1,000 that you narrate. Hadithun tadrihi khayrun min alfi hadithun tarwihi. That if you just understand one narration properly in its fullness, it is better than 1,000 that you narrate. Meaning that we have heard this hadith mentioned so many times. But if we were to ask someone, what does it mean, Husaynun minni wa ana min al-Husayn? Or if a non-Shia or a non-Muslim was to ask me the meaning of this hadith and how it benefits you and I on a practical level, it may be that many of us are unable to express it in a way that we can convey it beyond just a philosophical or theological debate. So inshallah, this evening we want to understand how such a hadith may have impacted Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, but also tangibly impact you and I in the application of how you and I are in this world today. The hadith is interesting because it shows us that there is a very unique relationship between Rasulullah and Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Hussein is from me and I am from Hussein. At one level, if you were to question such a hadith biologically, a hadith does not make sense. It can be that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is from Rasulullah, from his lineage, from his loin. However, it is not biologically possible that Rasulullah is from Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And therefore it means something more than this. It shows that there is a relationship between the two of them in such a way that there is a mutual benefit from one another. That they are reliant upon each other in some way in order to flourish. That for Rasulullah to flourish, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam must flourish. In order for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, Rasulullah must flourish. And so there is a mutuality between the two of them. There is a codependence between the two of them. Hussein is from me and I am from Hussein. that there must be some level of relationship between them in a way which what they stand for is mutually developed between one another. This works at two levels. The first level is a very general level, and the second is a very specific level. What do we mean by this? At the general level, whatever Rasulullah stood for, Imam Hussein alayhi salam must also stand for. At the specific level, whatever Rasulullah was as a human being, Imam Hussein alayhi salam must also have replicated as a human being. And thus, whatever Imam Hussein alayhi salam was in his time, that also is something that Rasulullah would have stood for in his time. And had he been at the time of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, would have followed the very same path that Imam Hussein alayhi salam was on. They are not distinguished separately from each other. Whatever Rasulullah stood for, Imam Hussein alayhi salam stood for. Whatever Imam Hussein alayhi salam achieved in his time, Rasulullah would have implemented if he had been there in his own time. Here, in regards to the general, we have to question, what is it that Rasulullah came to do? And thus we have to see that in light of the time of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. What was it at the general level that Rasulullah had to accomplish in order for Imam Hussein alayhi salam to have to accomplish the very same in his time? At the general, and the specific, what was it about the personality that Rasulullah implemented that can be seen in the implementation of Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam? The first thing is to ask, what was Rasulullah expected to do in his time? What were the overriding goals, the mission of Rasulullah? That we can see is a relationship between him and the people of his own time. The Holy Quran has many ayat, and it starts off at the general level and then goes deeper into the responsibilities of Rasulullah. At the general level, the responsibility of Rasulullah is to liberate mankind from the challenges that they have. In the Holy Quran, in chapter 7, Surah Al-A'raf, verse number 157, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala delineates the mission of Rasulullah. Part of the verse we will quote, which is particular to our discussion this evening, to understand the relationship between Rasulullah and Imam Hussein alayhi salam. The Quran says that Rasulullah has come to break the chains that were placed upon the Hijazi community, or indeed mankind at large. But as a starting point, the mission of Rasulullah was to break the chains that had been placed upon the Hijazi community. أَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ, to break the chains, the shackles that held them down as a people. The Hijazi community, and in particular, the mission of Rasulullah was divided into two. There was a period in Mecca, and there is a period in Medina. And so, both sets of communities, the Mecca and the Medina, had various types of shackles that were placed upon them. Some were cultural, some were religious, and therefore, by virtue of the external shackles that were placed upon their thinking, placed upon their practices, they had also adopted internal shackles that had to be broken by Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Normally, when we talk to our children, or the Khatib or the Alim talks about the difference between Meccan and Medinan verses, we normally divide them into different types, different categories. For example, we say that the Meccan verses tend to deal with theology, our aqa'id, oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Madinah verses, we normally say, deal with matters of fiqh, normally deal with matters of jurisprudence. At one level this is correct. However, it actually goes deeper than this. If you look, that the Meccan community had certain specific challenges, and the Madinah community also had certain specific challenges. Therefore, the verses that were revealed had to reflect the challenges of the time. For example, the Meccan community, yes, it had to deal with theology, but the prime challenge within the Meccan community was that they believed in idols, that they had belief in idol worship. As a result of this, certain cultures had been built within the Meccan community. As a result, the Meccan community used to do things like perform tawaf of the Holy Kaaba naked, singing, clapping and dancing. The Meccan community used to bury their daughters alive. The Meccan community, na'udhu used to prostitute their own family members out. The Meccan community used to give away their own family members in order to pay off a debt. This was what the Meccan community was like. What had caused the Meccan community to be like this? That they could act in such a way? The answer was their idol worship. Why? Imagine, this is the idol. What were the idols created of in Mecca? They were created of sticks and stones, mud, clumped together. In order to make some sort of feature, they would give it a name and that would become their God. That would be their God of love, their God of children, their God of war, their God of rizq, and so on and so forth. What is the relationship between having an idol that you have made with your own palms of your hands, out of sticks and stones and sand and mud, and burying your daughters alive? Selling your own family members to pay off a gambling debt that you had. What's the relationship between the two? The relationship is simple. If your mind has become so shackled that you are willing to believe that this thing that you have made with your own hands is your God, has control over your destiny, can give you some benefit, can save you from harm, if I can manage to convince you that that thing that you have made with your own hands is God, then I can make you believe anything else if I wish to be able to make you believe it. If I tell you to bury your daughters alive, you will do it. If I tell you to sell your own family members to pay off a debt, you will do it. Because I have shackled your mind to that extent. If I can make you believe that's your God, I can make you do anything else because your mind has been blocked. When Rasulullah came to Mecca, this is what he had to break. The shackles that had been placed over the Meccan community was the idol worship, and the outcome of the outcome of the idol worship that had been created. Then he came to Medina. In Medina, the situation was different. The Madinans were not idol worshippers. What were they? They were believers in the divine religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were Jews and Christians and Zoroastrians living in Medina, and various different sects, various different versions of Christians, Jews and Zoroastrians were living in Medina. It was a very plural society. Like we are living in a very plural society with multiple ideas. What was the particular problem that had caused them to become so far away from their truths that they had changed the books of Revelation to suit their own needs, and the rabbis and the priests had corrupted their religions? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says within the Holy Quran, الَّذِينَ يَكْتَبُونَ الْكِتَابَ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ. What did they do? The priests in the Jewish and Christian faiths in Medina, they had written their own books with their own hands and then said, "Hāzā min 'indillah," this is from God. They would make up their own laws, claim this to be the history of Christianity, Judaism, their theology, their ethics, their tafasir, and they claim, "Hāzā min 'indillah," this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was the challenge within Medina. And so, when Rasulullah had to come to Medina and Mecca, he had two separate types of challenges. In Mecca, he had idol worship that had shackled the people. And in Medina, he had corruption of religion which had shackled the people. And so, there had to be various ayat, there had to be various strategies, there had to be various discussions in order to liberate the people from the types of challenges that they had within their own particular times. Now hold this in your mind. The overriding goal and responsibility of Rasulullah was what? وَيَضَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِصْرَهُمْ أَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ, to break the shackles upon their community. In the community there were two types of shackles. There was the problem of the idols and what that created, and there was the corruption of the religion and what that had created. Rasulullah says, "Husaynun minni wa ana min al-Husayn." Husayn is from me and I am from Husayn. Fast forward 50 years. And you know what happened in those 50 years, from the time of the Khulafa, from the time of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, the Khawarij, and now the time of Yazid ibn Muawiyah. 50 years passes. Now comes the grandson of Rasulullah, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Husayn is from me, I am from Husayn. My mission was to liberate and break the shackles that hold the mind, hold the community, that have shackled the discourse, that have impacted the growth of my society. And Husayn ibn Ali, my grandson, now takes on the very same responsibilities as me in his own time. Imam Hussain alayhi salam begins to depart from Medina. As he does so, look again at his mission statement. He says, "Inni lam akhruj ashiran, wala batilan, wala mufsidan, wala zaliman, wa innama kharajtu li talab al-islah fi ummati jaddi Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam." Husayn is from me and I am from Husayn. What is Husayn's mission? I am not rising because I am a mischief maker, or I am an oppressor, or I seek fame. I am rising for one reason and one reason only, and that is reformation, to bring things back to the time and the ummah of my grandfather, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Meaning that there is that direct relationship between Rasulullah and Imam Hussain alayhi salam. The same overriding challenges that were present at the time of Rasulullah had crept up again 50 years later in the period of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. He had to break the shackles that had held the community once again. In Mecca had risen idol worship. However, 50 years on, it wasn't the same type of idol worship. They had not idolized the sticks and stones. What they had begun to idolize were people. That we can now have a caliph by name, and he can say and he can do what he wants, and we idolize and fetishize him. And as a result, because we have this person speaking to us, this new caliph shackled our thought process. They can kill as many followers of Ahlul Bayt as they want, and they can get away with it. They can pillage from Bayt al-Mal and get away with it. They can do whatever they want, but a new idol has been placed in the mindset of the people. And as a result of that idol that had been placed at the head, the apex of the religion of Islam, it once again shackled the people. And so, when the Caliph asked them to do whatever he wanted them to do, they were now willing to implement the same practices that they had been practicing 50 years ago. Then the society had said that you should go to war with each other and kill. At the time of Rasulullah, mass war was taking place constantly. Now, again, at the time of the Khulafa, if we wish you to go to war, we will force you to go to war. If we want you, 50 years ago, at the time of Rasulullah, to bury your children alive, we will make you do worse at this time. Instead of burying your daughters alive, we will see a 6-month-old on the battlefield, and if I tell you to shoot a 3-pronged arrow into his neck, you will shoot the 3-pronged arrow into the neck of Ali ibn al-Asghar. The idol had changed, but the idol was still present. And that idol had shackled the thought processes of the people. It could make them do anything that they had wanted them to do. In Medina, the challenge for Rasulullah was the challenge of a distorted set of religions. That the pure religions of monotheism, the pure religions of Musa alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salam had been corrupted so much that it did not resemble the reality of those religions. Hence, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala needed to send Rasulullah in order to bring about the truth of those religions again. 50 years had passed. 50 years had passed. And in the time of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, the religion of Islam had been corrupted so much it no longer resembled Islam as the way it was. The same issue of 50 years prior, where Christian priests and Jewish priests could just make up the laws of their religion. الَّذِينَ يَكْتَبُونَ الْكِتَابَ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ. This is from God. They would just make up the religion. This happened 50 years later at the time of Hussein ibn Ali. Did Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan not pay people hundreds of thousands of dinar in order to corrupt the tafsir of the Quran? Did they now not have a completely different theology? Did they not have a completely different fiqh? The Caliph at that time, Yazid ibn Muawiyah, what would he say? No revelation came from the skies. Muhammad played with the kingdom. I am doing this so that my ancestors at Badr would be proud of me. Look how they corrupted the religion. The same way it needed Rasulullah in order to break the shackles of a corrupted religion, it required a Hussein to break the shackles of the people that had a corrupted version of the religion being inherited to them one generation after another. This is at the general level. And the more you and I listen to the stories of Rasulullah and the stories of Hussein ibn Ali, you and I can juxtapose in our own time, in our own reflections, the relationship between the general responsibilities of Rasulullah and the general responsibilities of Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam in his time. However, there was also a specific relationship between Hussein ibn Ali and Hussein. That the personality of Rasulullah that he had, Hussein ibn Ali would practice that in the very same way. And this is very important for you and I, as followers of Rasulullah and the followers of Hussein ibn Ali to inculcate in our own time and understand the specific examples. Here I want to give you two stories, and you will see the relationship between Rasulullah and Imam Hussein sallallahu alayhi. An ayah of the Quran, which comes to us from Surah Al-Kahf, chapter number 18 of the Holy Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِرٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ إِن لَّمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَٰذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَسَفًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Rasulullah, you would almost die of grief because of how much you want these people to be guided to your words. Think about that statement in the Quran, not in Hadith, in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells about Rasulullah, you will almost be overcome by grief. You will almost die from the amount of grief that you have because you want these people in Mecca and Medina to be guided. Have you ever had a family member that's been ill, or a loved that's been ill, and you've been worried sick about that person? You will have a glimpse of what Rasulullah was going through. There's an associated story on this ayah. One day, Rasulullah was given a gift. He was given a beautiful, thick, red abba. A beautiful, thick, red cloak. And you know, in the winter of the Arab, it's very cold. And so a thick cloak would be very helpful to keep you warm. One would think that Rasulullah would keep it for himself. No. He knocks on the door of his greatest enemy, Abu Jahl. Knocks on the door and says to him, "Oh Abu Jahl, I give you this cloak as a gift. Maybe you have not understood my da'wah to you. Maybe I have not said something correctly and you misunderstood me. I give you this gift as a peace offering between us, so that we may sit and discuss between each other, because I wish that you would come towards my religion. Just talk to me if you misunderstood something. And I give you this gift as a means to be able to open the door between us." Hadith says, and I paraphrase, Abu Jahl slammed the door in the face of Rasulullah. The father of ignorance against the Father of all mercy. This verse was revealed. You will almost be overcome by grief because of how much you love these people and how much you want them to be guided. This was Rasulullah. Fast forward 50 years to the 10th of Muharram, and you would see the same personality in Hussein ibn Ali. The hadith says, one of the most famous stories on the 10th of Muharram, says, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is all alone on the battlefield. There is none left. He enters and he begins to cry, weep uncontrollably. The enemies call out to him, they say, "Mimma buka ya Aba Abdullah." Why are you crying, O Aba Abdullah? Think about this question for a second. Hussein ibn Ali is all alone. He's about to enter into the battlefield. And they ask him, "Why do you cry?" He could have responded by saying, "Are you kidding me? You just killed my Akbar. You just severed the arms of my Abbas. You just shot an arrow into the neck of my Azkhar. In a few minutes you will pillage the tents of my sisters and daughters. You would dare asking me why I'm crying?" He didn't say this at all. Listen to the response of Hussein ibn Ali and understand, Husaynun minni wa ana min Husayn. Mimma buka ya Aba Abdullah. Why do you cry, O Aba Abdullah? He responds by saying, "I cry for your sake. O enemies, O army of Yazid, why do you throw yourselves into the pitfalls of hell? I cry on your behalf because I wish that you do not go into the pitfalls of hell. Al-Husayn rahmah, kama jaddahu kana rahmah. Hussein is rahmah, like his grandfather was rahmah. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. I don't cry for my sake. I cry for you, the ones that are about to behead me. I cry because I wish God to guide you and to stop you from what you're doing. Have you ever heard anything more magnanimous than a person who cries for the one that is about to shoot him with an arrow? Brothers and sisters, this is Husayn ibn Ali. That he would weep over his own enemies and pray that they would not end up in the perdition of hellfire. When Rasulullah says, Al-Husayn minni wa ana min al-Husayn, it is no ordinary statement. Whatever at the general level Rasulullah stood for and implemented, Husayn stood for and implemented 50 years later. Whatever Rasulullah was in his personality, Husayn was 50 years later in his personality. And that brings us to you and I. Because if we want to be followers of Husayn ibn Ali, it requires us not to end our devotion with things like attending the Husayniyah, matam, crying, julus, ziyarah. These are very external ways of following Husayn ibn Ali. It is upon you and I to internalize Husayn ibn Ali. He cried over his enemy for guidance. How might you and I implement Husayn ibn Ali today? If you and I see our enemies, those people who wish to assassinate, murder, obliterate Islam and Shi'ism, cry for their sake to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give them guidance. It is easy to say, La'natullahi alayhim ajma'een. It is harder to say, Allah yahdihim, may Allah guide them. That is what Husayn ibn Ali did, first and foremost. Those people that wrong you and have hurt you and have stolen from you and hurt your reputation and made you lose your jobs, cry on their behalf. Seek for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive and guide them. Stand in Salat al-Layl and in your 40, don't just pray for those people you love. Pray for those people that have hurt and oppressed you. By Allah, you will understand Husayn ibn Ali like you have never understood Husayn ibn Ali. Ma'atam, fine. Be like Husayn on the 10th of Muharram that cried for those that shot arrows into him. And this, my brothers and sisters, is what the Shia of Husayn ibn Ali need to become today. That is the next stage of our evolution as a community on behalf of Husayn ibn Ali. Walhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi al-Tahirin. I ask you to conclude this discussion with a loud salawat in honor of our third Imam, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Abi Abdullah al-Husayn, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi.